What would you do if you lost everything in a single night? Your home, your dignity, your hope, standing in freezing rain with two newborn babies and $47 to your name? Would you accept help from a stranger, knowing it might cost you the only thing you have left, your independence? This is Sarah Mitchell's story, and it starts at 2:13 in the morning when her entire world collapsed. If stories like this make you believe that hope can emerge from the darkest moments, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. These real stories reach people who need to hear them most, and your support helps us share more journeys of resilience and unexpected redemption. Thank you for being here. Sarah Mitchell woke to violent pounding that made her 6-week-old twins, Emma and Noah, startle in their shared crib. Her phone said 2:13 a.m. The pounding continued, harder now, accompanied by voices that carried authority she'd learned to fear since Michael died 3 months ago. She pulled on her robe, the same one she'd worn in the hospital the night they told her the accident had been instant, that her husband hadn't suffered, as if that somehow made the widow part easier to swallow. 3 men stood in her hallway. Her landlord, Mr. Patterson, held papers that looked official in the dim corridor light. 2 security guards flanked him, their presence making clear this wasn't a conversation. The building sold yesterday, Patterson said without preamble, not meeting her eyes. New owners want immediate possession. Everyone vacates tonight. You've got 30 minutes to pack essentials. Sarah's brain couldn't process the words fast enough to form coherent protest. 30 minutes? I have 2 premature infants. It's February. Where am I supposed to go at 2 in the morning? That's not my problem anymore, Patterson said, and she caught something in his voice, maybe guilt, maybe just exhaustion with other people's tragedies. Papers are legal. You can contest it later, but right now, you need to leave. Behind her, Noah started crying, that particular newborn sound that meant hunger mixed with the general injustice of existing outside the womb. Emma joined him seconds later, their cries harmonizing in the way that had become Sarah's constant soundtrack since Michael's funeral, since his mother had looked at Sarah holding the twins and said the words that still burned like acid, if you hadn't gotten pregnant, he wouldn't have been driving to get diapers at midnight. He'd still be alive. Sarah moved through her apartment like she was underwater, her hands functioning while her mind simply stopped trying to make sense of anything. She filled the diaper bag, grabbed formula, extra bottles, the thermal blankets from the NICU. Her hands shook as she dressed the twins in their warmest clothes, their tiny bodies so fragile, still weeks away from their original due date, still needing careful temperature regulation and feeding every 2 hours. She had $47 in her wallet. Her next paycheck from the hospital came in 5 days. Her phone held 3 contacts, her supervisor at work, the pediatrician's office, and Michael's mother, who'd made it clear Sarah was no longer family the moment they lowered Michael into the ground. The security guards watched impassively as Sarah carried the twins down 3 flights of stairs, the elevator already disabled, her arms aching by the 2nd floor. February air hit her face like a slap, temperature in the 20s, wind carrying sleet that stung exposed skin. The twins screamed against the cold despite their blankets. Sarah had nowhere to go. No family, Michael's parents had been her only family, and they'd made their position devastatingly clear. No close friends, nursing school and new motherhood had consumed the years when other people built support networks. No money for a hotel even if she could find one with vacancy at this hour. She walked because staying still in this cold would hurt the babies more than movement. Her mind cycled through impossible calculations. Shelters would be full on a February night, and she couldn't expose premature infants to shelter conditions anyway, their immune systems still developing. Sleeping in her car wasn't an option. She'd sold it 2 months ago to pay for Michael's funeral expenses. His life insurance had lapsed when he changed jobs, something she'd discovered only after he died. She could call 911, report herself as homeless with infants, let the system intervene. But Michael's mother was already threatening custody proceedings, claiming Sarah was unstable. Involving child services would hand her the ammunition she needed. 4 blocks from her former home, Sarah saw light. A 24-hour diner, the kind that survived on night shift workers and insomniacs, offering refuge without requiring explanation. She pushed through the door, warmth hitting her face so suddenly it hurt. The twins stopped screaming, either from the temperature change or exhaustion. A waitress with tired eyes and a name tag reading Diane glanced at them but didn't comment, that particular urban grace of not asking questions about other people's midnight emergencies. Sarah collapsed into a corner booth, positioning the twins between her and the wall, their car seats occupying most of the space. She ordered coffee she couldn't afford, knowing she was paying for the right to occupy space more than for the drink itself. 3:27 a.m. She had to figure out something before dawn, before the diner filled with breakfast crowds who would notice her situation and possibly call authorities out of well-meaning concern. That's when she noticed him. A man sitting alone at the counter, laptop open, expensive clothes that looked deliberately casual, the kind of studied informality that wealthy people adopted to pretend they were approachable. He was Asian American, maybe late 30s, with a particular exhaustion around his eyes that came from insomnia rather than just late work hours. He'd been watching her, she realized, not in a threatening way, but with the focus of someone trying to solve a problem. When Diane brought Sarah's coffee, she quietly said, "Already paid for. And your food, whatever you want, also covered." Sarah looked toward the counter, but the man was focused on his laptop again, as if feeding homeless mothers was just something he did at 4 a.m. on Tuesday mornings. She should have felt grateful. Instead, she felt humiliated, reduced to charity case, to someone so obviously desperate that strangers paid for her coffee out of pity. But Noah needed feeding, and pride was a luxury she couldn't afford with $47 and no home. She ordered scrambled eggs and toast, food that would give her enough energy to nurse the twins and think clearly. When it arrived, there was extra, enough for 2 people, and a side of fruit that cost extra on the menu. The man at the counter left before she finished eating, but he left something on her table as he passed, a business card placed face down next to a paper napkin with handwriting in neat, precise script. The napkin said, "I don't know your story, but I know what it looks like when someone's trying to hold everything together alone. The number on this card reaches me directly, 24 hours. If you need help finding resources, housing assistance, anything, call. No strings, no judgment. Just help if you want it." The business card read Daniel Chen, founder and CEO, Prometheus AI Systems. Beneath his name, a phone number written in the same handwriting as the napkin note. Sarah sat in that diner until 6 a.m., watching early morning commuters filter in for breakfast, normal people with normal problems, with homes to return to, with lives that hadn't imploded. She fed the twins, changed them in the bathroom, walked circles around the block when they got fussy, always returning to the booth Diane silently held for her. The business card sat on the table like a small bomb. Sarah had nothing. She had 2 babies who needed warmth and safety and medical care, premature infants who were supposed to be monitored by specialists, who had appointments scheduled with pediatric cardiologists because Emma had shown minor valve irregularities in her last exam. She had a phone with 73% battery and nowhere to charge it. She had pride that was worth exactly nothing when measured against her children's needs. At 6:42 a.m., with the February sun rising over a city that felt hostile in its indifference, Sarah made a choice that terrified her more than the homelessness, more than the uncertainty. She called the number on the business card. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert, not groggy, as if he'd been awake waiting. "This is Daniel." Sarah's voice cracked when she tried to speak, exhaustion and fear and humiliation combining into something that barely qualified as words. "You said to call if I needed help." "I need help. I have 2 babies and nowhere to go and I don't know what I'm doing anymore." There was a pause, but not the hesitation of regret, more like someone rapidly problem-solving. "Where are you right now?" "The diner." "We're still at the diner." "Stay there," Daniel said, and his voice carried a certainty that felt like solid ground after hours of freefall. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. We'll figure this out." 23 minutes later, a black Tesla pulled up outside the diner. Daniel Chen looked different in daylight, younger somehow, though the exhaustion around his eyes remained. He approached her booth with the careful body language of someone trying not to spook a wounded animal. "I have an apartment," he said without preamble, sitting across from her as if homeless women called him at dawn regularly. "It's in a building my company owns in the financial district. It's vacant, fully furnished, available immediately. You can stay there while you figure out next steps, find permanent housing, get back on your feet. No rent. No timeline. Just a safe place for you and your children." Sarah stared at him, trying to identify the catch, the hidden price tag that always accompanied male generosity toward vulnerable women. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Daniel said, and his eyes held something she couldn't quite read. "Grief, maybe. Recognition. I lost my twin sister 2 years ago. She died in childbirth, she and her daughter, because she couldn't afford the level of care she needed. Insurance denied coverage for the specialist she required. By the time I found out, it was too late to help." He looked at the twins sleeping in their car seats, his expression painful to witness. "I can't bring them back. But I can help you. Let me help you." The apartment was on the 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking San Francisco Bay, the kind of space Sarah had only seen in magazines. 3 bedrooms, modern kitchen, baby supplies already stocked, as if Daniel had called ahead and had someone prepare for twins. "This is too much," Sarah said, standing in the living room that was larger than her entire former apartment. "I can't accept this." "You already did when you called," Daniel replied gently. "And you can. Because refusing help when you need it isn't strength. It's just fear dressed up as pride, and your children deserve better than that." Over the following days, Sarah learned that Daniel's generosity extended beyond housing. He'd hired a night nurse to help with feedings, giving Sarah the first full night's sleep she'd had since the twins were born. He'd arranged for the twins' medical appointments to be transferred to specialists at UCSF, quietly covering the costs that her inadequate insurance didn't. He never asked for gratitude or recognition. He simply helped, efficiently and thoroughly, as if her crisis was a business problem he could solve through resource allocation. But Sarah noticed other things too. The way Daniel visited the apartment only when she invited him, never presuming access despite owning the building. How he always brought practical gifts, diapers, formula, never flowers or jewelry or anything that could be construed as romantic interest. How he talked to her like a person, not a charity project, asking about her thoughts on policy issues, about her nursing career, about her opinions on AI ethics when she mentioned interest in medical technology. They fell into a routine. Daniel would stop by twice a week, usually bringing dinner from restaurants Sarah couldn't pronounce correctly, teaching her about different cuisines with the patience of someone who genuinely wanted to share things he loved. He'd hold the twins while she ate, his movements careful but increasingly confident, talking to them in Mandarin with a softness that made Sarah's chest ache. He told her about Prometheus AI, about building systems meant to improve healthcare access, about trying to prevent tragedies like his sister's death through better resource allocation algorithms. 3 weeks into this arrangement, Sarah made a mistake. She searched Daniel Chen online. The results were overwhelming. Forbes listed his net worth at $3.4 billion. Articles about Prometheus AI's latest funding round, their revolutionary healthcare prediction models, Daniel's reputation as a reclusive genius who rarely gave interviews and never attended social events. Photographs from 5 years ago showing him with a woman labeled as former fiancée, articles about their broken engagement when she'd left him for someone with more conventional work-life balance. And then, buried in search results, she found it. An article from 2 months ago, a PR strategy piece in a tech industry publication discussing reputation management for billionaires. Prometheus AI was mentioned specifically, with quotes from their PR director about how strategic philanthropy could soften Daniel's image as emotionally detached, how personal charity stories played better with investors than corporate giving. The article mentioned seeking authentic opportunities to demonstrate personal commitment to the company's healthcare mission. Sarah felt sick. She scrolled back through her memory of that night in the diner, Daniel's carefully positioned laptop, the too convenient timing of his presence. Had he been there looking for exactly this, a photogenic tragedy to adopt, a redemption narrative to humanize his brand? Was she just the latest project in his portfolio, the homeless mother with adorable premature twins who'd make such compelling content for press releases? When Daniel arrived for his usual Wednesday visit, Sarah was waiting with her phone open to the PR article. "Is this what I am to you?" she asked, her voice shaking with rage that felt safer than the hurt underneath. "A strategic philanthropic opportunity? Good publicity for Prometheus AI? The CEO who saves homeless mothers, very compelling narrative." Daniel went very still, his face draining of color. "Where did you see that?" "It doesn't matter where I saw it," Sarah said. "Is it true? Did your PR team suggest finding someone like me? Making me your charity project to improve your public image?" Daniel closed his eyes, and when he opened them, Sarah saw something she hadn't expected: shame. "The initial contact was strategic," he said quietly. "My PR director suggested I be more visible in personal philanthropy. She knew I worked late at that diner sometimes, suggested I keep an eye out for opportunities to help in ways that could be documented later. I was supposed to report back, provide details for a press strategy." Sarah felt something break inside her chest, trust she'd been carefully rebuilding since Michael's death shattering again. So this was all performance. Me, the twins, the apartment, everything. Just content for your image rehabilitation. "No," Daniel said fiercely, stepping forward before stopping himself. "It started that way. I won't lie about that. But Sarah, the moment I saw you with those babies, the moment you called, everything changed. I stopped sending updates to PR. I told them to drop the entire strategy. I helped you because I wanted to, because you needed it, because seeing you fight for your children reminded me why I built this company in the first place." "Get out," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. "Get out of this apartment that you own, that you so generously provided, and find another charity project to feature in your press releases. Because I'm done being your redemption story." Daniel left without argument, but the look on his face stayed with Sarah for hours afterward, devastated in a way that seemed too genuine to be performance. But she'd been fooled before, by her mother-in-law's promises of support that evaporated the moment Michael died, by her landlord's assurances that her lease was secure, by every system that had failed her when she needed it most. She couldn't afford to trust that Daniel's pain was real. The next morning, Sarah received a registered letter. Inside was a lease agreement transferring legal ownership of the apartment to her name, bought outright, no mortgage, no strings. A separate document showed a trust fund established for Emma and Noah's education and medical expenses, irrevocable, with Sarah as sole trustee. A handwritten note said, "This isn't charity or strategy. This is what I should have done for my sister and couldn't. You don't have to forgive me, but please don't let pride make your children suffer for my mistakes. The apartment and trust are yours legally regardless of whether you ever speak to me again." Sarah sat in the beautiful apartment that was now somehow hers, holding legal documents that represented more money than she'd earn in 10 lifetimes, and sobbed. Because Daniel had removed himself from the equation entirely, had given her everything she needed to be independent, had made it impossible for her to feel indebted. He'd eliminated the power dynamic that had made his help feel unsafe, and in doing so, had proven that maybe, possibly, his care had been genuine after all. That afternoon, her phone rang from a number she'd blocked weeks ago. Michael's mother, her voice cold with satisfaction. "I know about your billionaire benefactor," she said without preamble. "I know you're living in an apartment he provided, that he's been paying your expenses. I've filed for custody of Emma and Noah, and I have evidence that you're an unfit mother, homeless, dependent on strange men for survival, clearly unable to provide stable environment for my grandchildren." The custody hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Sarah hired the best lawyer she could find, using money from a fund Daniel had set up that she'd discovered only by reading the trust documents thoroughly. But her lawyer was pessimistic. "Your mother-in-law has resources and social standing," he said gently. "Her lawyers will argue that you've been homeless, that you're living on charity from a man you barely know, that you're emotionally unstable following your husband's death. She has character witnesses, documentation of your housing crisis, everything needed to paint you as incapable of providing the stability children need. Sarah called Daniel for the first time since asking him to leave. I need your help, she said, hating how weak her voice sounded. Not money. I need you to testify. Tell the judge that the apartment is mine legally, that I'm not dependent on you, that I'm capable of providing for my children. There was a long pause. I'll do better than that, Daniel said finally. Trust me one more time. That's all I ask. The custody hearing felt surreal, Sarah sitting at a table while lawyers discussed her life as if she wasn't present, her fitness as a mother reduced to bullet points and financial statements. Michael's mother testified tearfully about her son's death, about Sarah's negligence in getting pregnant when they couldn't afford it, about finding Sarah homeless with infants, about the inappropriate relationship with a billionaire benefactor that demonstrated poor judgment and moral instability. Then Daniel took the stand. He was dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Sarah's former car, his presence commanding the courtroom's attention. Under oath, he testified about meeting Sarah, about providing temporary housing, about the legal transfer of property. Her mother-in-law's lawyer pressed him about the nature of their relationship, the implications of such generous gifts. Daniel's response was measured and devastating. I helped Ms. Mitchell because I failed to help my own sister in similar circumstances, and it cost her life. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here because I've spent the last month investigating the circumstances of Michael Mitchell's death. He paused, producing documents that Sarah had never seen. Michael Mitchell died in a car accident at 12:43 a.m. on November 7th. He was driving to a 24-hour pharmacy to purchase diapers and infant formula. Police reports indicate he was distracted, his phone showing multiple missed calls and increasingly aggressive text messages from his mother, Margaret Mitchell, who was upset that he'd chosen to stay home with his wife and newborn twins rather than attend her birthday dinner. The courtroom went silent. Daniel continued, his voice professional but cold. The accident occurred within 15 minutes of the last text message Margaret sent, which read, "If you choose that woman over your own mother, don't bother calling yourself my son." Phone records show Michael was attempting to call his mother back when he lost control of the vehicle. While Margaret Mitchell wasn't legally responsible for the accident, her harassment directly contributed to the circumstances that led to her son's death, and she's now attempting to blame Ms. Mitchell for a tragedy she herself helped create. Margaret's face went white, then red. Her lawyers objected, arguing relevance, but Daniel wasn't finished. He produced more documents, years of family court records that Margaret had sealed, showing a pattern of controlling behavior with her own children, testimony from Michael's siblings about emotional abuse, documentation that Margaret herself had been investigated for neglect decades ago when her children were young. Every piece of evidence was meticulously sourced, legally obtained, devastating in its completeness. The judge called a recess. When they returned, her decision was swift. Full custody to Sarah, with Margaret allowed only supervised visitation if Sarah chose to permit it, which Sarah was not required to grant. The judge's statement was pointed. Mrs. Mitchell, your attempt to weaponize your daughter-in-law's temporary hardship while ignoring your own contribution to your son's death demonstrates exactly the kind of judgment that makes you unsuitable for custody of these children. This court finds Ms. Mitchell to be a capable, devoted mother who has overcome extraordinary circumstances with grace and determination. Outside the courthouse, Sarah found Daniel waiting by his car. You had all that evidence the whole time, she said. Why didn't you tell me? Because it was your fight, Daniel replied. I could provide ammunition, but you needed to be the one standing up for your children. That's what makes you strong, not my money or resources. That's what makes you an incredible mother. Why are you really doing this? Sarah asked, and she meant all of it, the apartment, the trust fund, the investigation, everything. Because when I watched my sister die, Daniel said quietly, I realized I'd spent my whole life building systems and algorithms and companies, but I'd never actually helped a specific human being when it mattered most. You weren't a project or strategy to me, Sarah. You were a chance to finally be the person I wished I'd been for my sister, someone who showed up and stayed and fought when it was needed. 3 months later, Sarah testified before the California state legislature about housing protections for new mothers, her story helping pass emergency protections against eviction for families with infants. She'd become an advocate, using her experience to change systems that had failed her. Daniel attended the hearing, sitting in the back row, asking for nothing and receiving nothing except the knowledge that his help had enabled her to help others. They started slowly, dating in the careful way of two people who'd already seen how badly things could go wrong. Coffee dates while the twins stayed with the night nurse Daniel still paid for, over Sarah's protests that she could afford childcare now. Walks through Golden Gate Park where they talked about everything except their obvious growing attachment. Daniel met Emma and Noah officially as Sarah's boyfriend on a Saturday morning, bringing age-appropriate toys and treating the twins with the gentle respect of someone who understood that children were people, just smaller. Sarah fell in love with him the day she found him assembling a crib at 3 a.m. because he'd read that twins often slept better in separate beds after 6 months, and he wanted to surprise her. She loved him for the way he asked her opinion on Prometheus AI's healthcare initiatives, genuinely incorporating her nursing expertise into their algorithms. She loved him for never, not once, making her feel like she owed him anything. Daniel fell in love with Sarah the night she held him while he cried about his sister, 2 years of grief finally released because Sarah understood loss in ways his wealthy friends never could. He loved her for insisting on paying rent even after the apartment was legally hers, her pride something to be respected rather than overcome. He loved her for seeing him as human rather than as wealth or status or potential solution to problems. 1 year after that February morning in the diner, Daniel proposed in the same booth where they'd met, Diane the waitress serving as unofficial witness. He didn't offer a ring yet, just a question. Marry me because you want to, not because I helped you once. Marry me because you love who I am, not what I can provide. Marry me because we're partners building something together, not because you feel grateful or obligated. Sarah said yes, then added, but I'm keeping my apartment, the one you gave me. It's going to be a safe house for other mothers in crisis, and you're going to help me run it. Daniel kissed her then, in front of Diane and the early morning truck drivers and anyone else who cared to witness. Deal, he said. Best deal I've ever made. The Sarah Mitchell Foundation opened 18 months later, providing emergency housing, legal assistance, and medical care for mothers facing homelessness. It was funded by Prometheus AI but run entirely by Sarah, who'd built a team of social workers, lawyers, and advocates. Daniel showed up for board meetings and fundraisers, but mostly, he showed up for Sarah, for Emma and Noah, for the family they'd built from impossible circumstances and mutual willingness to trust again after loss. On their wedding day, small ceremony with only close friends, Sarah wore her grandmother's dress that had survived multiple moves in a storage unit she'd maintained even when homeless, some things too precious to abandon. Daniel's vows mentioned his sister, promising to honor her memory by being present, by showing up, by never letting fear of loss prevent him from loving fully. Sarah's vows promised partnership, equal footing, building together rather than being rescued or rescuing. Emma and Noah served as flower children, dropping petals with the chaotic enthusiasm of 3-year-olds who didn't understand weddings but loved the attention. That night, lying in bed in the apartment that had started as charity and become home, Sarah thought about that February morning when she'd had nothing, when accepting help had felt like admission of failure. She'd learned that strength wasn't refusing assistance, but having the courage to accept it, to trust, to rebuild. That's the story, Sarah whispered to Daniel, already half asleep beside her. The one I'll tell them when they're older. Not that Mommy was homeless, but that Mommy was brave enough to let someone help, and strong enough to build something beautiful from the worst night of her life. Claude uma ia e pod cometer eros. Por favor, verifique as respostas.